Good evening to those bored enough to watch. Night Watch at Freddy's, the July 5th archive is a reimagining of the first official Five Nights at Freddy's game. However, it includes a lot of new and interesting mechanics that I believe makes this game worth experiencing. However, I do think that to an extent, the game does introduce too many mechanics to the point where the game feels improperly balanced and overly reliant on luck. In this video, I want to discuss everything I liked and disliked about this game and why I would recommend it to you. So, with that said, let's discuss Night Watch at Freddy's, the July 5th archive. This game situates you within an office in between two doors to your left and right. Throughout the game, these will remain closed, with you needing to open them again and shine the light into whatever is beyond the darkness of the hallway to ward off threats. Unlike the original first Five Nights at Freddy's game, which made you keep the door closed when you saw an animatronic standing at the hallway, I think that this is an interesting change as it forces the player to put themselves in danger and make themselves vulnerable to an animatronic in order to ward them off, which could make the experience more tense for some. Other changes that have been made to what you may be familiar with in the official game is that instead of power counting down from 100%, this game has a breaker stress level which counts up to that percentage instead. Anything you do in the office, with the exclusion of the doors being closed, will cause this to go up. Hence, you need to be strict with managing the power when doing things like checking the lights in the office and checking the cameras, as it's important to only do so when absolutely necessary. Furthermore, it's worth noting that while the doors being closed doesn't strain the power, opening them does, which is why it's important to only open them when you're sure of a threat being nearby. You're also encouraged to limit any time you spend with things that cost power, such as the cameras or opening the doors. This is because the usage meter from the official game is present in this game, which will go up as the night proceeds, only doing so when you do things such as open the cameras, open the doors, check the lights and other things. In order to make the usage meter go down, you need to stop whatever you're doing and wait for it to do so before being able to use anything again. If you continue to use the power when the meter is at its highest, the breaker stress percentage will go up much faster. One thing that a lot of reimaginings or remakes of the first official Five Nights at Freddy's game try to include is the live system, which was originally a mechanic in that game before it was removed during its development. I think that a lot of mechanics that re-include them misunderstand why it was removed in the first place, choosing to instead do so to maintain their authenticity as a remake or reimagining of what a Five Nights at Freddy's beta version would look like. This game tries to include something of this nature as well, although I think that it handles the system much better. This is because the game also includes a scoring system, which grants you points during the night for doing things like warding off animatronics when they're at your door, among other things. When you lose the night, you lose a life, and when you beat a night, you gain a life. However, unlike most games that make you restart the game in its entirety from night 1 if you lose all your lives, this game only resets the score if you happen to lose them all. I think that this is a much better way of handling this kind of system, since it still presents stakes for those who care about their score while not hindering the experience for those who just want to proceed with the game and restart nights from where they left off after having died or something of that nature. It's more convenient and less demotivating to the player when they lose all their lives, while still presenting a consequence to some extent. In the grand scheme of things, the score doesn't really matter as far as I'm aware, but despite that, I think that the game incorporates the life system in a really good way that doesn't disrupt the experience, which I think is worth appreciating. As alluded, you're given a camera system in this game, which is needed for various things such as checking the position of every animatronic in the game, as well as anticipating their arrival at the doorway. Hence, it's important to regularly check on various areas of interest throughout the night to anticipate and check on certain animatronics, although I do think that the game overdoes this to an extent, which I will discuss soon. For now, I think that the game's general layout is easy to understand, and it does a good job of introducing new mechanics while still retaining the atmosphere of the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. This game features 6 animatronics, with 5 of them appearing in the main 5 nights, while the other only appears in the 6th. Benny will mostly function how you'd expect Bonnie to in the first Five Nights at Freddy's game. He'll leave his position on the stage and gradually make his way to your office. When you see him on the camera stationed outside, you should generally pay more attention to him, as when he leaves that room, it's indicative that he's about to enter your office. Hence, you need to open the door and flash the light at him for a continued duration of time until he leaves. He'll then go back to his place on the stage and the cycle will repeat. Chickadee 2.0 functions the same way you'd expect Chica to in the first official game, as she'll mostly follow the same route as Benny, but she'll arrive at the door opposite to the one he comes through. When you see her leave the room room stationed outside your office on that respective doorway, you need to open the door, and unlike Benny, who required you to keep the light on him for a continued, uninterrupted amount of time, Chickadee will instead require you to flicker the light at her to make her leave. It's a small, subtle difference, but a significant one all the same, as it's helpful for differentiating Benny and Chickadee. One aspect that this game places a significant emphasis on is ensuring that Benny and Chickadee's movements don't synchronize and align so that they appear at their respective doors simultaneously. Due to the demanding nature of how you deal with them in this game, you can only really ward off one of them at a time. With that in mind, excluding some rare exceptions, both of them arriving at the same time is guaranteed to cause your demise, since by the time you're finished dealing with one of them, you'll have little or no time to deal with the other. This is because before dealing with them, you need to confirm whether they're actually at your door through the cameras, as if they happen to arrive at your door while it's still open, they'll automatically attack without giving you the chance to ward them off. Hence, you're highly encouraged to only open the door when you're mostly certain that they're there. To slow down their movement throughout the building, you can watch whatever room either of them is in, which is helpful for keeping their movement patterns desynchronized and hence making it easier to deal with one of them at a time. Foxy will appear in the Pirate's Cove. Throughout the night, you'll need to monitor her as she undergoes a series of phases before trying to run for your office. When she does leave, you'll need to look at the sign on the respective camera to know which door she'll come through. With that information in mind, you'll need to then open that door, wait for her to enter, and then stare at her until she leaves and goes back to the Pirate's Cove, where the cycle will then repeat. If you don't react to Foxy, she'll run into the door, which will temporarily disable it for a brief time, during of which you can be attacked by whichever animatronic typically arrives, such as Benny or Chickadee. Hence, you're given incentive to always check on Foxy and ensure that you're aware of when she's about to attack and what door she'll come from, as while she doesn't outright end the night, she does act as an avenue for other animatronics to do so. The puppet is an animatronic who can appear in any of the cameras at random. When it does so, you'll hear an audio cue to indicate this. After hearing it, you need to check through every room to find where the puppet is to recharge the stop button that will appear in whatever room it's in to get rid of it. If you don't do this in time, you'll be attacked. Freddy is the last main animatronic who will activate during the main 5 nights. Throughout the night, he'll move between 4 different rooms on the cameras, with his movements being indicated through the sound of his laughter. You need to find and confirm which room he's in, as if you don't see him in any of them, it's indicative that he's in the garage. When you suspect that he's there, you need to go to their respective room and activate the motion detector to scare him out and back into the main building. If you fail to do this in time, he'll begin tampering with the power, which will cause it to eventually run out completely. When this happens, you'll be subjected to a power out sequence where he'll jump scare you. The jailbird is exclusive to the 6th night. To my knowledge, jailbird will try to enter from the 2 doors in front of you in the office. To ward it off, you just need to open the cameras continually until it enters and shortly leaves you alone afterwards. I think that the animatronics in general do a decent job of engaging the player and encouraging them to be constantly engaged with the game, as you're required to keep a consistent watch of various things, such as ensuring Benny and Chickadee are desynchronized, as well as Freddy and Foxy's positions and the puppet whenever it makes an audio cue. The strategy for this game sees you needing to keep watch of multiple things, as every animatronic present in the game needs to be monitored to some degree. For example, it's important to keep Benny and Chickadee out of synchronization, which means that you'll need to be watching at least one of them to slow down their movement so that you can deal with one of them at a time. On top of this, you'll also need to check on Foxy to see what phase she's on and what door she'll come through if she left. Additionally, you'll also need to keep a consistent watch of Freddy when he laughs, as when he doesn't appear in any of the rooms he tends to go to, then you'll need to use the motion detector to scare him out of the garage. Lastly, the puppet is an animatronic that provides an element of randomness to the game, since it can appear at any time throughout the night in any of the cameras. While I can appreciate that the game gives you a lot of things to watch over in an engaging and interesting way, I personally think that there is way too many mechanics to keep track of in this game, to the point where it feels somewhat unfun and overwhelming in a way that feels unbalanced. I think that it's unfair to introduce elements of randomness in a game that sees you needing to heavily monitor other animatronics such as Benny and Chickadee to keep them out of synchronization. After a while, it begins to feel like animatronics such as the puppet can cause unnecessary hindrances to the gameplay and only exist to serve as a way to make the game more artificially difficult. I think that the game could have reduced the amount of things you need to watch, especially with what's already here being so intensive with how thoroughly you need to keep watch of things as is. I also think it's unfair to include elements of luck in a system of this nature, since it feels demotivating to die due to factors outside of your control such as Freddy, Foxy or the puppet moving, requiring your immediate attention while you're trying to ward off Benny and Chickadee. Perhaps this is an issue specific to me, as things of this nature are always subjective and the tolerance for how many mechanics a game like this should include is always subjective, but I personally think that including 3 mechanics that require your constant attention is too much, and a lot of these mechanics tend to clash and overwhelm the player in a way that feels demotivating to play after a while, particularly when so many factors to beating the night are dependent on luck. Overall, I think that this was a mostly fun and engaging game that provided interesting and demanding mechanics. However, after a certain point in the game, I think that the game overdoes this to the point where it feels unfun and overwhelming to play, as the game is overly reliant on multiple elements of luck, which can feel unfair when combined with mechanics that already require so much of your attention. However, it is possible that these are just issues specific to me, so if you are fond of games of this nature, regardless of how overwhelming it can get at times, then I would recommend Night Watch at Freddy's, the July 5th archive. So, there's the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I don't have as much to say in this video, so I'll skip to what I normally say. If you want to view the list of games I want to make videos about in the future, you can always do so through the link in the description. Additionally, if you want to follow me, then my socials will be linked in the description, as well as any afterthoughts or messages I may want to add. With that, I haven't really got much else I want to say, so I'll see you all in my next video. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.